The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the dusty shoulder. A little girl, no more than 8, knelt in the gravel, her small hands trembling as she scratched lines into the dirt with a stick. Her face was streaked with tears and grime, eyes wide with the fear that no child should know. She was alone. Abandoned by the side of the road, her faded pink dress torn at the hem. The map she drew was frantic, jagged paths twisting into the dense woods beyond, marking spots with crude X's that screamed urgency. A truck rumbled past without slowing, its exhaust choking the air, leaving her smaller, more isolated. In the distance, the faint cry of a hawk pierced the silence, but it was her soft whimpers that cut deepest, a sound like breaking glass in the quiet afternoon. If this story's gripping you already, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of redemption on the road. Let's build this community together. Ethan Ghost Harlan throttled down on his weathered Harley, the engine's growl echoing through the convoy like a beast stirring from sleep. He was the last in line of the Iron Vow riders, a tight-knit crew of 20 hardened souls who'd patched their leathers with stories of battles fought and promises kept. At 42, Ethan carried the weight of his past in the faint scar running down his jaw, a souvenir from a desert skirmish 2 decades back where he'd lost his squad and sworn an oath to a dying brother. Protect the innocent, no matter the cost. That promise had faded like old ink, buried under years of bar fights and empty miles, until moments like this yanked it back to the surface. He spotted the girl first, her tiny form a stark contrast against the endless ribbon of highway. "Hold up!" he barked into his helmet mic, signaling the others to pull over. The convoy screeched to a halt in a symphony of brakes and rumbling pipes, dust clouds billowing like smoke signals. The girl froze, stick dropping from her fingers as the bikers dismounted in a wave of black leather and chrome. Ethan approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel, hands raised to show he meant no harm. The air smelled of hot rubber and wild sage, the kind that clung to your skin after a long ride. "Hey, kid," he said softly, kneeling to her level, his voice rough but steady, like gravel under tires. "What's got you out here drawing secrets in the dirt?" Her eyes darted to the woods, then back to him, lips quivering. She didn't speak at first, just pointed to her makeshift map, tracing the lines with a dirty finger. "They're gone," she whispered finally, voice cracking. "My brother. He said to wait here. But the bad men took him into the trees. I drew it so someone could find him." Ethan's gut twisted, a familiar ache blooming in his chest, the echo of his own losses, the brother he'd buried under foreign sands. He glanced at the map. A winding trail snaking off the road, deeper into the shadowed pines where the underbrush thickened like a living wall. The other bikers gathered, their faces a mosaic of concern and quiet resolve. There was Marcus, the burly ex-firefighter with arms like tree trunks, who'd joined the club after pulling Ethan from a wreck 5 years back. Beside him, Lena, the only woman in the core crew, her ponytail tucked under a bandana. Eyes sharp as she scanned the horizon. They'd all come together under the Iron Vow, a code etched into their patches. Loyalty above all, promises unbroken. This wasn't just a roadside stop. It felt like fate's cruel hook, reeling them into something bigger. "Bad men?" Ethan echoed, keeping his tone even, though his mind raced. The girl nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "They had trucks, like the ones that shake the ground. My brother saw them, doing something wrong in the woods. He tried to run, but they grabbed him." She jabbed at an X near the center of her drawing. "This is where. Please, he's only 10. The words hung heavy, stirring murmurs among the riders. Ethan stood, rolling his shoulders to shake off the chill that had nothing to do with the cooling air. He remembered his own vow, whispered over a foxhole radio, Watch for the lost one's ghost. Don't let 'em fade like we did. That brother was long gone, but the promise lingered, a ghost in his veins. He turned to the crew, the sun glinting off their bikes like badges of honor. "We ride in," he said simply, no debate needed. The iron vow wasn't about glory. It was about standing when others walked away. Lena crouched by the girl, offering a water bottle from her pack. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sarah," she murmured, clutching the bottle like a lifeline. "And my brother's Caleb." Ethan nodded, committing the names to memory. As the bikers remounted, engines roaring back to life, Sarah climbed onto Lena's bike, her small hands gripping the jacket. The convoy peeled off the highway, following the dirt path her map had etched, a narrow vein cutting into the forest's heart. The woods swallowed them whole, sunlight fracturing through the canopy in golden shards that danced on the needle-strewn ground. Branches whipped at their faces, the scent of pine and damp earth filling their lungs. Ethan's mind replayed fragments of the past. The explosion that stole his unit, the letter from home about his sister's overdose, the endless roads that numbed the pain. This ride felt different, charged with purpose. They pushed deeper, the trail narrowing until bikes bumped over roots and ruts. Sarah's directions guided them, her voice faint over the wind. Left at the big rock, then straight. Tension built like storm clouds, the air thick with unspoken questions. What were these bad men hiding? Loggers, poachers, something darker tied to the shadows Ethan had run from for years? After 20 minutes, the trees thinned, revealing a clearing scarred by tire tracks and felled logs. Abandoned equipment littered the ground, rusted chains, a tarp fluttering in the breeze. But it was the fresh signs of struggle that stopped them cold. Trampled grass, a child's sneaker half buried in the mud, and drag marks leading to a cluster of dense brush. Ethan killed his engine, the sudden silence amplifying the distant snap of twigs. "Spread out," he ordered, voice low, eyes sharp. The bikers fanned into the undergrowth, hearts pounding with the weight of what they might uncover. Sarah stayed back with Lena, her map now a crumpled talisman in her fist. As Ethan pushed through the foliage, a glint caught his eye. A silver chain, like the one he'd given his brother before deployment. He froze, pulse thundering. This wasn't random. It was a pull from the past, demanding he honor the vow. Deeper in, the air grew heavy, laced with the metallic tang of fear. What they found next would test every fiber of their code, binding them in a promise that could redeem or destroy. The woods held its breath, waiting. The underbrush clawed at Ethan's sleeves as he pressed forward, the silver chain dangling from his gloved fingers like a forgotten prayer. It wasn't his brother's, not exactly, but the sight of it twisted something deep inside, a reminder of oaths sworn in the heat of chaos under skies that offered no mercy. The forest around them was alive with subtle menace, the rustle of leaves in a breeze that carried the faint, acrid whiff of smoke, long since faded, and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot that set every nerve on edge. Behind him, the Iron Vow riders moved like shadows, their boots silent on the mossy ground, faces etched with the quiet determination of men and women who'd stared down worse than whispers in the woods. Marcus took point to Ethan's right, his massive frame parting the ferns with ease, flashlight beam cutting through the dimming light like a knife. "This place feels wrong," he muttered, voice a low rumble that blended with the distant call of a crow. Lena stayed with Sarah at the clearing's edge, the girl's small hand clutched in hers, but even from here, Sarah's whispers guided them. "Not that way. The other trail, where the water sounds close." Ethan nodded to himself, folding the chain into his pocket. It could be nothing, a lost trinket from some hiker, but his gut, the same instinct that had saved him in ambushes overseas, screamed otherwise. The vow pulsed in his blood, protect the innocent. Caleb was out here, a boy no older than the recruits Ethan had trained back in the day, caught in something that reeked of shadows too dark for sunlight. They pushed on, the path Sarah's map had promised narrowing into a game trail, slick with mud from recent rain. Ethan's boots sank into the soft earth, each step pulling a sucking sound that echoed too loudly in the hush. Memories flickered unbidden, the desert nights where silence meant death lurking, the way his squad had huddled around a single lantern, sharing stories to keep the fear at bay. He'd lost them all in one blinding flash, and the promise to his dying brother had become his anchor, chaining him to the road with the iron vow. Now it pulled him deeper into these trees, toward a brother not his own, but no less vital. "Fan out wider!" he signaled with a hand, his voice barely above a breath. The crew complied without question. Loyalty wasn't debated, it was lived. 20 yards ahead, the foliage gave way to a shallow ravine, its banks eroded and tangled with vines. Ryan, the wiry veteran with tattoos snaking up his arms like war stories, dropped low first. "Tracks," he hissed, pointing to the churned soil. Fresh boot prints, heavy and uneven, mingled with smaller ones that could only be a child's, dragged, not walked. Ethan's jaw tightened, the scar on his face pulling taut. The air here was thicker, laced with the metallic tang of disturbed earth and something sweeter, like overripe fruit left to rot. They descended carefully, vines snagging at leather like desperate fingers, until the bottom revealed a sight that stopped them all cold. Tucked against the ravine's wall, half concealed by a fallen log, was a makeshift camp, tarps strung between trees, a fire pit ringed with stones still warm to the touch. Empty cans glinted in the fading light, and scattered tools lay abandoned, shovels crusted with dirt, a pickaxe leaning against a stump. But it was the maps, the real ones, not Sarah's scribbles, that drew Ethan's eye. Pinned to a sagging clothesline, they showed grids of the surrounding woods, marked with coordinates and symbols that whispered of secrecy. Circles around old mine shafts, arrows pointing to hidden clearings. This wasn't some casual squat. It was deliberate, hidden from the road's prying eyes. "Ghost," Lena called softly from the rim above, her voice edged with urgency. She'd brought Sarah closer under cover, the girl's eyes wide as she scanned the site. "She says this is it, the place the bad men brought Caleb." Sarah nodded, pointing a trembling finger toward a pile of debris in the corner, discarded ropes, frayed and muddy, and a scrap of fabric that matched the tear in her dress. No blood, thank God, just signs of a hasty struggle, a scuffle that left echoes in the trampled leaves. Ethan's mind raced, piecing it together. Trucks shaking the ground, boys snatched for seeing too much. What were they burying out here? Stolen goods? Something worse, tied to the corruption he'd glimpsed in border towns where officials turned blind eyes for the right price. Before he could voice the thought, a low groan cut through the tension, like wind through hollows, but too human. It came from beneath the tarp nearest the fire pit. The riders froze, hands instinctively hovering near concealed holsters, though the iron vow shunned guns for the weight of their word. Ethan motioned them back, approaching alone, his heart a steady drum against his ribs. He lifted the edge slowly, the fabric heavy with dew, revealing a figure curled in the shadows, a boy, thin and pale, wrists bound with zip ties that bit into his skin. Caleb. His face was bruised, eyes fluttering open to slits of confusion and pain, but alive, breathing shallow, chest rising in ragged bursts. Caleb. Sarah's cry shattered the silence as she broke from Lena's grasp, scrambling down the bank. The boy stirred, mumbling incoherently, his gaze locking on his sister with a spark of recognition. Ethan knelt, slicing the ties with a pocket knife, his touch gentle despite the calluses. "Easy, kid. We're the good ones." Up close, the boy's clothes were torn, dirt caked into scratches that spoke of resistance, not defeat. No deep wounds, just the marks of fear and fight, the kind that scarred the soul more than the flesh. Caleb's eyes darted to the maps, then to Ethan, a whisper escaping. They said no one would come. Digging for old things. Said I'd ruin it. The words hung like smoke, igniting questions in Ethan's mind. Old things? Relics from forgotten wars, or something poisoned, buried to evade the law? The crew gathered, faces grim with the moral weight of it all. Marcus scanned the perimeter, spotting a narrow escape trail leading deeper into the woods, fresh tire marks vanishing into the gloom. They're not gone far, he said. We cut 'em off. Ethan shook his head, helping Caleb to his feet, the boy leaning heavily on Sarah. This wasn't about chase yet. It was about the promise fulfilled, the innocent pulled from the brink. But as they climbed back to the bikes, the forest seemed to watch, branches swaying in warning. The bad men would return, and with them, the truth that could shatter everything. The ride out was slower, protective, Caleb wedged between Ethan and Marcus on the lead bike, Sarah with Lena. Engines hummed low, a convoy shield against the encroaching dusk. Ethan's thoughts churned, his own redemption tangled with this family's. The vow demanded more than rescue. It called for justice, quiet and unyielding. Back at the road, as stars pricked the sky, he knew the Iron Vow's ride had only begun. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The stars wheeled overhead like distant witnesses as the Iron Vow convoy emerged from the wood's embrace. The engine's low rumble, a defiant pulse against the night's chill. Ethan rode point, Caleb's slight weight a fragile anchor against his back, the boy's breath steadying with each mile, but laced with shudders that spoke of shadows yet to fade. Sarah clung to Lena behind them, her map now tucked safely in a saddlebag, a relic of desperation turned triumph. The highway stretched ahead, a silver thread under the moon, but Ethan's mind wasn't on the open road. It looped back to the ravine, to those maps pinned like secrets in the wind, and Caleb's whispered words, digging for old things. What buried ghosts could drag men to such lengths, snatching kids to silence their eyes? They pulled into a roadside diner off Route 17, the kind with neon flickering like a heartbeat against the dark, its parking lot gravel crunching under tires, worn from countless vows kept. The place was a neutral ground, walls papered with faded postcards from riders long gone, the air thick with the sizzle of grease and bitter coffee. Ethan killed the engine, helping Caleb down with hands that remembered too many battlefield carries. The boy winced, rubbing his wrists where the zip ties had left red welts, but his eyes held a spark now, gratitude mixed with the wariness of one who'd glimpsed the world's underbelly. You came, Caleb said, voice small but clear, looking up at Ethan, as if he were some mythic figure pulled from the pages of a storybook. Inside, the crew claimed a corner booth, the vinyl seats creaking under their leather-clad frames. Marcus ordered hot chocolates for the kids, his broad shoulders blocking the door like a sentinel, while Ryan scanned the lot through the window, ever the lookout. Lena sat Sarah beside her brother, brushing dirt from the girl's hair with a mother's touch she'd never had the chance to give her own lost dreams. Ethan slid in across from Caleb, the diner's fluorescent hum casting harsh lines on his scarred jaw. "Tell us what you saw, son," he said gently, sliding a mug his way. No pressure, just the quiet invitation of trust earned in the dirt. Caleb sipped, the steam curling like fog from his lips, eyes distant as he pieced it together. "We were playing by the creek, me and Sarah. Heard the trucks first, big ones rumbling like thunder, then voices, angry. They were yelling about the cash and no witnesses. I peeked through the bushes, saw them pulling up crates from a hole, old stuff, rusted boxes with locks like from a war movie." He paused, glancing at Sarah, who nodded encouragement. One guy, big with a beard, said it was worth more than gold, stuff the government forgot or hid. But when he saw me, he grabbed my arm, said I'd seen too much, that kids like me ruin everything. Ethan's fingers tightened around his coffee cup, the ceramic warm against calluses forged in fire. Old things, relics from the Cold War era perhaps, abandoned munitions or documents that could topple local powers if they surfaced. He'd heard whispers on the road, tales of corrupt officials fencing forgotten stockpiles, turning history's refuse into black market empires. It fit the maps, the secrecy, the snatch of a boy who stumbled too close. But it was the moral rot that gnawed at him. Innocence crushed for profit, a vow broken not by bullets but by greed's quiet blade. His own past echoed in it, the squad lost to a supply run gone wrong, promises shattered under bureaucratic lies. "These men," he asked, voice steady as steel, "you recognize any markings on the trucks?" Caleb shook his head, but Sarah piped up, her voice gaining strength. "One had a star on the door, like a sheriff's but crooked, and the leader. He had a tattoo, a snake eating its tail." The crew exchanged glances. Ryan leaned in, his tattoos twitching with recognition. "Sounds like the Rattler crew," he murmured. "Heard they're tied to the county line, shaking down old sites for scrap that ain't scrap. Word is they've got badges in their pockets, crooked ones." Lena's eyes narrowed, her hand on Sarah's shoulder a shield. The Iron Vow had crossed paths with such shadows before, men who wore authority like a mask, preying on the forgotten fringes where laws bent like reeds. Outside, the night deepened, a patrol car's lights flashing distant on the horizon. Routine or something more? Ethan's vow stirred, a fire banked but unquenched. This wasn't just rescue, it was reckoning, a stand against the corrosion that ate at society's edges. He thought of his brother. The last words crackling over static, "Keep the light on for them, Ghost, the ones who can't fight back." Back then, it had been soldiers. Now, it was these kids. Their map, a call he couldn't ignore. "We get you safe first," he told Caleb, meeting the boy's gaze. "Then we make sure no one else gets hurt like this." As the diner clock ticked toward midnight, a plan formed in hushed tones. Contact allies in the next town, a veteran network that spanned diners and back roads, eyes everywhere. Marcus sketched routes on a napkin, his firefighter's precision mapping evasion paths. But tension coiled like smoke. The bad men would circle back, drawn by the loose end of a missing witness. Ethan stepped out for air, the cool breeze carrying the scent of pine from the woods they'd left behind. Stars above mocked with their indifference, but the road ahead gleamed with purpose. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was the miles between shadows, the loyalty that bridged them. Back inside, Caleb finished his story, the weight lifting like dawn's first light. "Thank you," he whispered to Ethan, extending a small hand. Their palms met, rough against soft, sealing an unspoken pact. The Iron Vow rose as one, engines firing in the lot like a chorus of resolve. They rode into the night, guardians on chrome steeds, the kids safe in their fold. But as the highway blurred, Ethan sensed the storm brewing, justice's price, paid in quiet courage. The wood's secrets weren't buried deep enough, and neither were his own. The ride pressed on, binding fates in the unbreakable chain of honor. The highway unfurled like a black vein under the moon's pale gaze, the Iron Vow's engines a steady thrum that cut through the night's velvet hush. Ethan led the pack, Caleb's arms wrapped tight around his waist. The boy's warmth, a quiet reminder of stakes higher than any he'd faced in foxholes or barroom brawls. Sarah rode with Lena, her head bobbing against the woman's back, exhaustion claiming the edges of her fear. The diner faded in the rear view, its neon a fleeting beacon swallowed by the dark, but the weight of Caleb's words lingered heavier than the saddlebags. Old things, crates from forgotten holes, a snake tattoo twisting around Greed's throat. The Rattler crew, crooked badges and buried sins, had stirred a hornet's nest the iron vow couldn't ignore. Ethan's vow, that desert-born oath to shield the lost, now intertwined with these siblings' fragile thread, pulling him toward a confrontation that smelled of corruption's rot. They veered off the main drag after 30 miles, tires crunching onto a gravel access road that led to an old quarry turned safe haven. The Iron Vow had claimed it years back, a cluster of weathered cabins ringed by chain link and pine, a bolt hole for when the road turned treacherous. Floodlights hummed to life as they rolled in, casting long shadows that danced like wary ghosts across the pitted ground. Marcus dismounted first, his bulk a reassuring wall as he unlocked the gate, the metallic clang echoing into the woods. "Home for the night," he rumbled, clapping Ryan on the shoulder. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, bikes chained, perimeter checked. The kids ushered into the main cabin, where a wood stove crackled against the chill. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged timber and faint pine sap, a sanctuary pieced from salvaged beams and unbreakable bonds. Ethan settled Caleb on a threadbare couch, the boy's eyes heavy but alert, tracing the patches on the riders' vests like talismans. Lena brewed tea from a battered kettle, steam rising in lazy curls that softened the room's edges. Sarah curled beside her brother, clutching a blanket woven with the club's emblem, an iron fist clasping a broken chain, symbol of vows forged in fire. "You did good drawing that map," Ethan said, sinking into a chair across from them, his voice a low anchor in the quiet. Caleb nodded, fingers tracing the welts on his wrists, the skin raw but healing. "I thought. No one would believe us. The bad men said kids don't count." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the crew. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his gaze distant. "They count to us," he replied simply, the vow unspoken but etched in every line of his face. As the night deepened, stories unfolded around the stove's glow, fragments of lives stitched into the Iron Vow's tapestry. Marcus shared how he'd pulled a family from a burning rig on his last fire call, the flames roar, drowning his own screams until the oath took root. Lena spoke of her nursing days in a war-torn clinic, binding wounds while promising mothers their sons would return, promises she'd carried into the wind when the system failed. Ethan listened, his scar itching under the lamplight, memories surfacing like submerged wrecks. The squad's last patrol, the blast that stole breath and brotherhood, his brother's final gasp sealing the pact. "We don't let the dark win," he'd whispered then. And now, with these kids' eyes on him, it rang truer. The Rattlers weren't just thieves, they were the fracture in justice's armor, preying on the overlooked to hoard shadows from the past. Relics, maybe Cold War contraband, documents that could expose graft in high places, or worse, toxins buried to evade reckoning. Whatever it was, snatching Caleb to bury the secret screamed of fear. The kind that bred desperation. A plan coalesced in the firelit murmurs, sketched on a scarred table with pencil stubs and resolve. They'd hole up till dawn, then ride to Blackwood Junction, a speck of a town 20 miles east, where an old ally, Doc Harlan, no relation but family all the same, ran a clinic with ears in every hallway. He'd patch the kids proper and tap the veteran grapevine for Rattler intel. No guns, no raids. The Iron Vow's justice was surgical, rooted in truth's unyielding blade. "We expose 'em," Ethan said, tracing a route on the crude map. "Get the word to the right folks. Clean badges, maybe feds who ain't bought. Those crates surface, their game's over." Caleb's eyes widened, a flicker of hope piercing the fatigue. "You mean, we win?" Sarah squeezed his hand, her voice a whisper. "With them, yeah. But doubt gnawed at the edges, a psychological undercurrent Ethan felt in his bones. What if the corruption ran deeper, tentacles wrapping town halls and backroom deals? He'd seen it overseas, commanders turning blind for kickbacks, soldiers paying with their lives. Here it was civilians, kids like these, caught in the crossfire of men's avarice. As the crew bunked down, watches set in rotating shifts, Ethan stepped onto the porch, the night air crisp with frost-kissed pine. Stars wheeled above, indifferent sentinels to human frailties. He thought of redemption's cost, the miles that isolated, the promises that bound tighter than chains. Saving Caleb and Sarah was the spark, but fanning it to flame meant facing his own ghosts, the guilt of survivors, the silence of unspoken grief. A distant owl hooted, a solitary call that mirrored his resolve. Alone no more, with the vow as kin. Inside, the kids slept at last, breaths sinking in the cabin's hush. Marcus joined Ethan, handing him a flask of black coffee, steam ghosting the chill. "This ride's personal for you, Ghost. I see it." Ethan nodded, the admission heavy. "Brothers vow. Lost ones like them. Can't let 'em slip." The big man clapped his shoulder, a gesture solid as oak. Loyalty wasn't declared. It was the quiet pulse of the club, chosen family rising when blood failed. Dawn crept closer, painting the horizon in bruised purples, promising trials that would test the vow's mettle. The rattler's shadow loomed, but so did the light of honor, unbent and fierce. As engines stirred in the pre-dawn grey, the convoy reformed, kids secured in the center like precious cargo. Ethan throttled up, the road calling with its siren song of purpose. Justice wasn't vengeance, it was the moral stand, the redemption earned in ethical fire. The wood's secrets whispered warnings, but the iron vow rode on, unbreakable. If this story's gripping you already, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of redemption on the road. Let's build this community together. The pre-dawn mist clung to the quarry's edges like a reluctant shroud as the iron vow's engines growled to life, their vibrations humming through the frost-kissed ground. Ethan twisted the throttle, the Harley's familiar rumble, a steady heartbeat against the chill that seeped into his bones. Caleb rode pillion, his small frame pressed close, breaths sinking with the rhythm of the road, while Sarah nestled against Lena's back in the convoy's heart. The safe haven faded behind them, cabins blurring into silhouettes swallowed by the waking woods. Ahead, Blackwood Junction waited, a forgotten speck on the map, its streets lined with sagging porches and secrets buried deeper than roots. Ethan's mind churned with the night's revelations. Crates unearthed from shadowed pits, a snake tattoo coiling around forbidden gains. The vow tugged at him, that desert whisper demanding he unearth the truth, not for glory, but for the quiet honor of standing unbowed. The miles melted under tires worn smooth by endless oaths, the highway curving through valleys where fog pooled like spilled milk in the hollows. Pine-scented air whipped past, carrying the faint tang of dew and distant rain, sharpening senses dulled by the night's vigil. Ryan flanked Ethan's left, his bike weaving subtle scans of the rear view, ever the shadow watching for encroaching dark. Marcus brought up the rear, a bulwark of muscle and memory, his presence a silent promise that no one rode alone. The kids had dozed fitfully in the cabins, but now Caleb stirred, his voice cutting through the wind's howl. "Will they come after us?" The question hung fragile, laced with the innocence Ethan had long ago surrendered. He glanced back, meeting the boy's wide eyes. "Not if we move smart. We're the ones who decide the ending now." Blackwood Junction emerged from the haze like a half-remembered dream, its main drag a ribbon of cracked pavement flanked by clapboard storefronts, their awnings fluttering in the breeze like weary flags. The clinic sat at the edge, a squat building with peeling white paint and a sign creaking on rusted chains, "Hope's Haven Medical." Doc Harlan, no blood tie but bound tighter than family, waited on the porch, his silver hair catching the first slivers of sunlight, stethoscope draped like a badge of battles won. He'd patched Iron Vow riders more times than Ethan could count, his hands steady from years stitching wounds in forgotten wars. The convoy rolled to a halt in a cloud of dust, engines dying to a collective sigh. Doc's eyes scanned the group, lingering on the kids with a grandfatherly warmth that masked the steel beneath. "Ghost," he greeted, clasping Ethan's forearm in a grip forged from shared roads. "Heard whispers on the wire. Brought trouble home." Ethan nodded, dismounting to help Caleb down, the boy's legs shaky but holding. Sarah slid off Lena's bike, clutching her brother's hand like a lifeline. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and aged wood, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead, casting a clinical glow on exam tables lined with faded charts. Doc ushered them to a back room, away from prying windows, where cots waited like old friends. "Let's see to these two first," he said, his voice a low anchor. As he checked Caleb's wrists, reddened but unbroken, signs of restraint fading like echoes, Sarah recounted the tale in hushed tones, her map reproduced on scrap paper, lines trembling with remembered fear. Ethan paced the hallway, leather creaking, the weight of inaction pressing like an ill-fitted yoke. Redemption wasn't handed out, it was clawed from the dirt of dilemmas, each choice a step toward honoring the ghost in his name. His brother's vow echoed, "Protect the lost, keep the light burning." But light exposed shadows, and these rattlers thrived in them, crooked stars on truck doors, badges bent to serve greed. Ryan joined him, leaning against the wall, tattoos shifting like living ink. "Doc's got connections," he murmured. "Old vet network runs deep here. Says the crew's been hitting sites like that ravine for months, pulling up relics from the old bunkers, stuff the government sealed after the big chill. Documents, maybe tech sold to the highest bidder overseas, but it's the local ties that stink. Sheriff's office turning blind, pocketing cuts." The words landed heavy, stirring the ethical storm Ethan had felt brewing since the woods. Corruption wasn't a distant thunder. It was the rot at the core, eroding justice like acid on metal. He'd seen it abroad. Commanders trading lives for silence, leaving squads to fade into sand. Here it was civilians, kids like Caleb, silenced for stumbling on crates that could unravel a web of lies. A moral crossroads loomed. Expose it quietly, through channels untainted, or ride harder, risking the vow's fragile peace. Lena emerged from the exam room, her face set in quiet resolve. "They're clear, no deep marks, just the kind that heal with time. But Caleb, he remembers more. The leader threatened the town. Said spilling would bring the end to anyone who talked." Doc overheard, rubbing his chin, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "End's already here if we let it fester. I've got a contact. Clean fed out of the regional office, owes me from Nam days. We get photos of those maps. The crate's haul, it could crack the shell." He pulled a battered radio from a drawer, its dials worn smooth, and tuned to a frequency humming with static-laced voices. Ethan watched, the air thick with the scent of fresh bandages and brewing storm. This was the vow's essence. Chosen kin weaving nets of loyalty, pulling truths from darkness without descending into it. But as the radio crackled to life, a voice broke through, garbled, urgent. "Rattlers moving, headed your way. Kids are the key." Tension spiked like a live wire, the clinic's walls closing in. Marcus burst from the front, his frame filling the door. Two trucks, unmarked, circling the block. Slow, like they're sniffing. Ethan's pulse thrummed, the scar on his jaw pulling tight. No chase yet. The kids needed rest. The plan needed legs. "Fortify," he ordered, voice calm as forged iron. The crew moved seamless. Ryan barred the back door, Lena herded Sarah and Caleb to a hidden alcove behind supply shelves, Doc dimming lights to shadows. Outside, engines idled low, bikes repositioned as barriers, chrome glinting like drawn blades. The vow demanded sacrifice, not spectacle. Stand firm, let truth be the weapon. From the window, Ethan glimpsed the trucks, hulking shadows prowling the street, headlights cutting fog like accusations. One paused, a figure leaning out, snake tattoo flashing in the dawn's edge. They knew. Somehow, the rescue had rippled back, drawing the wolves to the door. Caleb's whisper from the alcove pierced the hush. That's him. The one who took me. Ethan's hand rested on the radio, ready to call in the ally, but doubt flickered. Could trust hold in a world where badges lied? The psychological vice tightened, pitting conscience against caution, the promise against peril. Redemption's path twisted here, in the quiet standoff of a sun-rising town, where loyalty's fire burned brightest. The trucks idled a moment longer, then peeled away, tires screeching into the mist, leaving only exhaust's bitter kiss on the air. False retreat or genuine? Ethan exhaled, the crew relaxing fractionally, but the air hummed with unfinished business. Doc's contact confirmed. Meet at noon, evidence in hand. As sunlight spilled golden over Blackwood's rooftops, Ethan knelt by the kids, his voice a vow renewed. We end this right, for you and the ones after. Sarah nodded, her small hand in his, sealing the bond. The iron vow's ride deepened, justice's moral forge heating to white-hot, promising trials that would bind or break. The road called onward, unyielding. Sunlight clawed its way over Blackwood Junction's rooftops, painting the clinic's walls in hues of amber and shadow, as if the dawn itself were reluctant to fully reveal the fraying edges of the town. Ethan stood by the window, his silhouette etched against the glass, watching the mist dissipate like a sigh from the retreating trucks. The air inside Hope's Haven carried the sharp bite of antiseptic mingled with the earthy residue of pine from their clothes, a reminder that the wood's secrets clung like burrs. Caleb and Sarah huddled in the alcove, blankets drawn tight around their shoulders, their faces pale, but etched with a budding resolve that mirrored Ethan's own scarred determination. The radio on Doc Harlan's desk hummed faintly, static whispering promises of the noon meet, a fragile thread to weave truth from the tangle of lies. Ethan turned from the window, his boots scuffing softly on the linoleum floor, each step measured against the weight of the vow that had pulled him from numb miles into this crucible. His brother's last words echoed in the quiet. Protect the lost. Keep the light burning. These kids were that light now, flickering against the encroaching dark of the rattler's web, crooked badges unearthing buried relics, silencing witnesses with grips that left only echoes of fear. Redemption wasn't a clean arc. It was this, the ethical grind of choices that tested the soul's metal, loyalty's chain holding firm where blood had long since thinned. "They're circling," he said to the crew, voice low and steady, like the rumble of an idling engine. Marcus nodded from his post by the door, arms crossed over his chest, a living barrier forged from years of pulling lives from flames. Doc Harlan emerged from the back, wiping his hands on a faded towel, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. "Kids are holding up. Rest and warmth'll mend the rest. But that contact of mine, Agent Reyes, he's solid. No ties to the local rot. We get those maps from the ravine sketched out. Add Caleb's account. It could blow the lid off." He glanced at the alcove, where Sarah traced invisible lines on the blanket, recreating her dirt-drawn guide with a precision born of necessity. Lena knelt beside her, bandana slipping loose as she murmured encouragement, her nursing hands gentle on the girl's shoulder. A chosen mother's touch in a world that often orphaned its own. Ryan paced the hallway, his wiry frame coiled like a spring, tattoos shifting with each turn. Trucks peeled off, but they know we're here, smelled it in the way they lingered. We ride out at 11, flank the meat spot from the old mill road. No heroics, just delivery. The plan unfolded in the clinic's hushed confines, sketched on a clipboard with Doc's precise strokes, routes veering through backwoods trails to avoid the main drag, where sheriff's cruisers might prowl like hounds on a scent. Ethan's mind raced ahead, piecing the psychological mosaic, the rattler's desperation, born from fear of exposure, mirroring his own buried grief. He'd run from the desert's ghosts for years, numbing the ache with highway miles, until this call yanked him back. Saving these siblings wasn't erasure, it was atonement. The vow's quiet fire, burning away the cynicism that had settled like road dust on his heart. Caleb stirred, pushing the blanket aside, his voice gaining edges of the fighter he'd glimpsed in the ravine. I can describe the crates better. Metal, stamped with eagles and numbers, like from stories Grandpa told about hidden wars. They were loading them frantic, like the ground might swallow 'em back. Ethan crouched to the boy's level, the fluorescent light casting hollows under his eyes, the scar on his jaw a silver thread in the glow. That helps, son. Truth's our edge, cuts deeper than any blade. The words carried the Iron Vow's creed. Justice not through force, but through the unyielding stand of integrity, exposing corruption's underbelly to the light it feared. Outside, the town stirred lazily, a delivery truck rattling past, its exhaust a faint cough in the morning air. But Ethan sensed the undercurrent, the way Blackwood's veins pulsed with unspoken alliances and betrayals. The crew prepped in silence, saddlebags stuffed with sketched maps, a burner phone for Reyes, water and rations for the road. Lena helped Sarah into a spare jacket, too big but warm, its leather scent a shield against the chill of uncertainty. By 10, the mist had burned off, leaving the sky a hard blue that mocked the tension coiling in their chests. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under his weight, inhaling the crisp bite of approaching noon. Pine whispered from the tree line, carrying faint echoes of the woods they'd stormed, a sensory tether to the promise fulfilled and the one yet to come. Marcus joined him, flask in hand, black coffee, strong as resolve. This could drag us deep, Ghost, you sure? Ethan's gaze fixed on the horizon where the mill road snaked into shadow. Sure as the vow. We don't walk away from the lost, not when they've drawn the map for us. Loyalty bound them, chosen family rising like dawn. Their leather's a patchwork of scars and stories, unbreakable in the face of moral tempests. Inside, Caleb and Sarah gathered their few things, a crumpled drawing, a sneaker scuffed from flight, eyes bright with the spark of agency reclaimed. Doc clasped Ethan's shoulder, a paternal grip heavy with shared history. Ride safe. I'll hold the fort here, feed the wire if they sniff closer. The convoy reformed in the lot, engines purring low to avoid drawing eyes, bikes gleaming under the climbing sun like polished oaths. Ethan mounted, Caleb behind him once more, the boy's grip tentative but trusting. Sarah with Lena, Ryan and Marcus flanking like guardians. As they rolled out, gravel spitting under tires, the clinic shrank in the mirrors, a bastion left behind. The road to the meet twisted through sun-dappled groves, tension building like thunder on the edge of hearing, Reyes waiting, relic secrets poised to unravel, the rattler's shadow lengthening. But as they crested a rise, a glint flashed in the rear view. Dust rising from the south, trucks on the tail like wolves scenting blood. Ethan's pulse quickened, the vows surging. A call to stand, to protect, to redeem in the fire of ethical pursuit. The chase ignited, not with fury, but with the steady burn of honor, the iron vow accelerating into the unknown, fates intertwined in the relentless pull of justice. Dust billowed like a vengeful spectre in the rear view as the iron vow pushed harder into the twisting mill road, engines snarling against the steep incline that clawed at their resolve. Ethan leaned low over the handlebars, the wind whipping his face with the sharp sting of pine and impending rain. Caleb's arms locked around his waist in a grip born of raw trust. The trucks gained, their guttural roars echoing off the flanking hills, headlights piercing the midday haze like accusatory eyes, two beasts on oversized tires, doors scarred with crooked stars that mocked the law they claimed to serve. The rattlers had scented their prey, drawn by the ripple of rescue, the kids' survival a loose thread in their web of buried sins. Ethan's scar burned under the strain, a phantom echo of desert blasts, but the vow thrummed louder, protect the lost, unyielding as the road beneath. Stay tight! Ethan barked into the wind, his voice lost to the roar, but felt in the convoy's seamless weave. Ryan veered right onto a narrow spur, scouting the flank, his bike kicking up gravel that pelted like warning shots. Marcus held the rear, a thunderous shield, while Lena kept Sarah close, her ponytail streaming like a banner of defiance. The mill loomed ahead, a skeletal relic of rusted iron and crumbling brick, its wheelhouse sagging against the river's murmur, a neutral ground chosen for the meat, shrouded in overgrowth that could swallow secrets whole. Agent Reyes was en route, his clean badge the key to unlocking the relic's truth. Crates of forgotten Cold War contraband, documents laced with graft that could topple the Rattler's empire of silence. But first, evasion. Justice demanded survival, not martyrdom. The lead truck surged closer, a bearded figure, snake tattoo coiling on his forearm, leaning from the window, gesturing wildly as if commands could bend fate. Ethan glimpsed the desperation in his glare, the moral fracture of a man who'd traded honor for shadows, burying innocence to hoard ghosts from the past. Caleb's breath hitched against Ethan's back. The boy's whisper cutting through the chaos, "That's him, the one from the woods." The words fueled the fire, transforming fear into forge-hot purpose. Ethan's mind flashed to his brother's foxhole oath, the static crackled plea that had chained him to this life of quiet stands. Redemption wasn't escape, it was this pursuit, loyalty's engine driving against corruption's tide. Chosen family a bulwark, where blood had faltered. They hit the mill's clearing in a skid of tires and dust, bikes fishtailing onto the overgrown lot where wild grass whispered against metal. The river rushed nearby, its frothy rush a sensory counterpoint to the pounding hearts, carrying the cool, mineral tang that mingled with exhaust's bite. Reyes' unmarked sedan waited in the shadows of the old loading dock. The agent, a lean man in his 50s, eyes hardened by decades of untangling webs, stepping out with a briefcase clutched like a lifeline. "Harlan!" he called, voice urgent but steady, scanning the horizon as the truck's engines crested the rise. The iron vow dismounted in fluid motion, forming a protective ring around the kids, leathers creaking like sails in a storm. No time for greetings. Ethan thrust the sketched maps forward, Caleb's descriptions spilling in a torrent. Eagle-stamped crates, frantic digs in the ravine, threats hissed in the dark. Reyes nodded, flipping open the case to reveal a recorder and files, his pen scratching details with clinical precision. "This ties it. Local sheriff's cut, federal oversight buried. We'll raid the sites by dusk, pull it all into light." But the trucks barreled into view, skidding to a halt 20 yards out, doors slamming like judgments. 4 men emerged, the leader's tattoo gleaming under the sun's unforgiving glare, hands hovering near belts but holding fire, bluffing, perhaps, sensing the noose of truth tightening. Ethan stepped forward. The crew at his flanks, a wall of resolve etched in scars and patches. The air thickened with tension, the river's roar amplifying the standoff's psychological edge, each breath a dilemma weighed, fight or fold, vengeance or virtue. "It's over," Ethan said, voice carrying like gravel over steel, meeting the leader's eyes without flinching. "The kids saw. We saw. Those relics surface. Your game's buried deeper than you dug." The man sneered, but doubt flickered, a crack in the facade, greed's armor buckling under the weight of exposure. No shots rang out. The Iron Vows code shunned the blaze, favoring the slow burn of integrity. Reyes raised his badge, radio crackling to life with distant sirens. Backup inbound, the clean wheel turning at last. The leader hesitated, glancing at his crew, the moral chasm yawning before him. One by one, they backed toward the trucks, engines revving in retreat, dust swirling as they fled the clearing like shadows fleeing dawn. No chase followed. The vow was fulfilled in the stand, justice's poetry unfolding not in blood, but in the unmasking. Caleb and Sarah watched from Lena's side, hands clasped, their fear ebbing into wide-eyed wonder. The map's promise redeemed, innocence shielded by strangers turned kin. As Reyes coordinated the sweep, bundling evidence into his sedan, the sun climbed higher, gilding the mill's ruins in golden absolution. Ethan knelt by the kids, the river's mist cooling his skin, a faint smile cracking his weathered face. "You drew the way home," he said to Sarah, ruffling Caleb's hair. Their nods sealed it, a pact beyond words, the chosen family's circle widening. Marcus clapped Ethan's shoulder, Lena's eyes shining with unspoken pride. Ryan scanning the tree line one last time. The relics would surface, truth's quiet revolution, exposing the rot, mending fractures in a cynical world. Ethan's ghosts stirred less fiercely now. The desert vow honored in these woods, redemption a road traveled, not conquered. The convoy reformed under the afternoon sky, engines humming a triumphant dirge as they rolled out, Reyes trailing to the regional office. Blackwood Junction receded, its secrets airing like laundry in the wind, the Iron Vow riding lighter, bound tighter by the trial. Ethan throttled up, the highway unfolding like forgiveness. Caleb's laughter, a rare, bright sound, carried on the breeze. Promises endured, loyalty's legacy etched in miles, justice a flame passed hand to hand. The road whispered onward, endless and true. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of unbreakable vows and quiet courage. If it touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join the Iron Promise family. More stories of redemption await on the horizon. Leave a comment below. What's one promise you've kept that changed everything?